barefoot and dying, she looked at him and said, "I don't want to die a stranger." Sarah had always walked the same path every day, not because she enjoyed it, but because it was the only path left for her. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the worn streets of her neighborhood. The ground beneath her feet was cracked and uneven, a reflection of the life she led. Her shoes had long since given up, leaving her feet bare to the world, carrying her through the days without much thought. She'd grown used to the pain, the discomfort, and the loneliness that followed her wherever she went. It was just a part of life now. She didn't remember when it had started. Perhaps it was when her mother had passed, or maybe it had been the slow drift away from her friends, one by one, until there was no one left to call. But whatever the reason, Sarah found herself living in this constant cycle of survival. Every day felt like a battle, and every battle seemed to end the same way, with her exhausted, defeated, and still alone. As she walked through the quiet street, she felt a sudden wave of dizziness. She stumbled for a moment, trying to steady herself, but her body betrayed her. Her legs gave way, and she collapsed onto the pavement. Her hands scraped against the rough surface, but she didn't have the strength to pull herself back up. The world around her seemed to spin for a moment, the edges of her vision blurring. She could barely make out the sounds of footsteps approaching, but she didn't have the energy to look up. A figure appeared in her blurred sight, and she felt a hand on her shoulder, gently lifting her.
"Hey, are you okay?" a voice asked.
It was kind, yet uncertain. Sarah couldn't answer right away. She simply looked up, her gaze meeting the face of a man she had never seen before. He looked to be around her age, maybe a little older. His face was weathered, but there was something in his eyes, a warmth, something that she hadn't seen in a long time. She tried to speak, but found that her throat was too dry. "Can you stand?" he asked softly, as if worried she might break into pieces if he tried to help her too much. Sarah nodded weakly, but when she attempted to lift herself, her legs refused to cooperate. The man sighed, his hand steadying her as he helped her into a seated position on the bench nearby. For a few moments neither of them spoke. Sarah felt a strange mixture of embarrassment and relief. She had been through so much, and yet here was a stranger helping her without asking for anything in return. She wasn't used to this. "You don't look so good," he said after a while, his voice gentle but concerned. "Have you eaten today?" Sarah shook her head, not trusting her voice just yet. She didn't need to explain. Her stomach had been empty more times than she could count, and her body had learned to function on little more than sheer determination. The man sat next to her, still keeping a careful distance. He seemed unsure of how to proceed, as though he didn't want to intrude on her space. But Sarah couldn't help but feel a little grateful for his presence. It had been so long since anyone had shown concern for her. Most people passed her by, pretending not to notice her struggles. It was easier that way. "Do you need anything? A drink of water? A snack?" he asked, his voice soft. Sarah shook her head again, not trusting herself to speak. She didn't want to burden him with her troubles. Didn't want to tell him how long it had been since she had felt truly seen. But as she sat there in the warmth of the evening, she realized something. It wasn't just his kindness that touched her. It was the fact that he had stopped, that he had noticed her at all. "I'm Tom, by the way," he said after a while, breaking the silence. He smiled, and Sarah found herself instinctively returning the gesture, though it was weak and tired. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Tom didn't push her for more information, which was a relief. He seemed content to just sit with her, offering her the quiet companionship she hadn't known she needed. "I don't mean to sound nosy, but what happened? You just collapsed there," he asked after a moment, his brow furrowed with concern. Sarah hesitated, but then something inside her shifted. She didn't know why she felt like she could trust him, but for some reason, she did. Maybe it was the way he had approached her so gently, without any judgment, or maybe it was just the simple fact that he had helped her without asking anything in return. "I don't know." "I've been feeling off lately," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. She looked down at her hands, folding them nervously in her lap. "It's like everything's getting heavier, and I'm running out of strength. I don't know how much longer I can keep going." Tom didn't interrupt, simply listening, giving her the space to speak. I used to have it all together, Sarah continued, her voice growing steadier now. I had a job I liked, friends I could count on. But when my mom passed, it was like the ground underneath me just disappeared. I couldn't keep up, and everything just fell apart. Tom nodded, his expression softening.
I get it. Life can throw things at you that you're just not prepared for.
And sometimes it feels like everything you've worked for just slips away. You understand? He smiled a little sadly. I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what you're going through, but I've had my own share of struggles. We all have our battles. The key is finding people who care about you and letting them in when you need help. That's not always easy, but it's the only way to make it through. Sarah felt a flicker of something inside her, hope maybe, though she wasn't sure. It had been so long since anyone had said anything like that to her. She had grown used to fighting her battles alone, thinking that it was the only way to survive. I'm not saying everything's going to be easy from here on out, Tom continued, but you don't have to face it all alone. If you ever need someone to talk to, or if you just want company, I'll be here. You don't have to do this by yourself. His words hung in the air for a moment, and Sarah sat there, absorbing them. She wasn't sure if she believed him fully, but the fact that he cared enough to say them meant something. She had spent so many years hiding behind walls, convincing herself that she didn't need anyone, that she could handle everything on her own. But here was this man, offering her a kind of understanding she hadn't known she needed. I appreciate it, Sarah finally said, her voice quieter now but filled with a softness that hadn't been there before. I really do. Tom smiled, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt like maybe, just maybe, there was something worth fighting for. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself looking forward to the moments when Tom would show up. He didn't have any grand plans or expectations. He simply arrived, sat beside her, and listened. There was something incredibly soothing about his presence. It was as though his kindness acted like a balm, healing a part of her she hadn't even realized was hurting. His visits became a small but essential part of her routine, and soon she began to feel the weight of the world slightly lessen. It was one of those ordinary days when Sarah was sitting on the same old bench she had come to know so well, her feet resting on the ground. The sun had dipped low in the sky, painting everything around her in shades of orange and purple. She was tired, not just from the physical exhaustion that came with surviving from day to day, but from the mental and emotional strain of holding everything in. For so long she had kept her pain hidden, locked away behind walls that had grown too high to climb. But there was something different now, something that had started to shift within her. Tom appeared as he often did, walking slowly toward her with his easy smile. As he neared, Sarah noticed something in his expression, an unspoken question, a curiosity that had been growing between them. She knew it was time to open up, even just a little. Maybe she couldn't carry all the weight alone anymore. You've been quiet today, Tom said as he sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance but close enough to offer comfort. Sarah nodded, not quite sure how to begin. She had never been good at sharing her inner thoughts with others. It felt strange, almost foreign. She had learned early on to keep her feelings to herself, to avoid burdening anyone with their troubles. But now, sitting next to Tom, she felt like there might be a safe space for her to let some of it out. I've been thinking, Sarah started, her voice uncertain but growing steadier with each word. I don't know what happened, but somewhere along the way, I stopped caring about myself. I started to believe that it didn't matter anymore, that I was just invisible. Tom didn't interrupt. He simply sat there, his gaze soft and patient. His silence wasn't one of judgment or pity. It was the kind of silence that made you feel heard, as if every word you spoke was important. I've been alone for a long time, Sarah continued. I lost my mom a few years ago. She was all I had left after everything else fell apart. When she was gone, it felt like everything disappeared with her. I didn't know how to keep going. I guess I just stopped. Tom's eyes softened, and Sarah could see that he understood, even though he didn't fully know the depth of her loss. He leaned forward slightly, as if his presence alone could somehow reassure her.
"I get that," he said gently. "It's hard when you lose someone you love, especially when it feels like they're the last connection to everything you once had.
But I want you to know, Sarah, you're not invisible. I see you. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Her heart clenched at his words. She had heard similar things before, but it always felt like empty promises from people who didn't really understand. But somehow, with Tom, it felt different. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. It was the sincerity in his voice, the steadiness in his actions. He wasn't offering her empty hope. He was offering her something real, his time, his attention, his presence. She swallowed, trying to push down the lump in her throat. "I don't even know how to fix things," she confessed. "I don't even know where to start. I've spent so long hiding from everything, from myself." "It's okay not to have all the answers right now," he said. "Sometimes the first step is just acknowledging where you are. And the second step is letting yourself be seen. I know it's hard, but you don't have to have it all figured out." Sarah let out a shaky breath, grateful for his gentle encouragement. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear someone say that. In that moment, a small spark of hope flickered inside her, something that had been dormant for so long. Over the next week, Sarah and Tom continued to meet. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they just sat in silence. But each time Tom left, Sarah felt a little lighter, a little less burdened by the weight of her past. She started to notice the small things, the way the sky turned pink at sunset, the smell of the breeze, the laughter of children playing in the distance. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to just be present in the world, without worrying about the future or dwelling on the past. One afternoon, as they sat on the bench, Sarah noticed something that made her smile. Tom had been bringing her coffee every day, something small, but it had become a sweet gesture that made her feel cared for. Today, he had brought a little something extra, a croissant, still warm from the bakery. "I thought you might like a treat," he said, offering it to her with a grin. Sarah took the croissant, touched by his thoughtfulness. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "I wanted to," he replied. "Sometimes it's the little things that make the biggest difference." "It's not about grand gestures, Sarah. It's about showing up, being there, even for the small things." She looked at him, a mixture of gratitude and wonder in her eyes. "You're right," she whispered. "I've been so focused on what I've lost that I forgot to see the little things, the things that still matter." Tom smiled, his eyes lighting up as he watched her slowly come back to life, even in small ways. "It's easy to get caught up in the big picture," he said. "But the little things, they're what keep us going, and you deserve to notice them." As the days went on, Sarah began to find herself again, piece by piece. She started to take better care of herself, eating more regularly, sleeping longer, and even taking time to enjoy the quiet moments. She still had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like there was hope. Tom, too, seemed to have found something meaningful in their conversations. He didn't share much about his past, but Sarah could tell that he had his own struggles, his own losses. It was as if they were both healing in different ways, their paths intertwining in this quiet, unspoken way. One evening, as the stars began to appear in the sky, Sarah looked at Tom, her heart full of gratitude. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not giving up on me. For showing up when I didn't even know I needed someone." Tom's expression softened. "You don't need to thank me, Sarah. You just need to keep going, and I'll be here, every step of the way." Sarah smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could face it. Not alone, but with someone by her side. It wasn't much, but it was everything she needed right then. Sarah was feeling the warmth of the sun on her face as she sat on the bench, a peaceful quiet surrounding her. She had been coming to this spot for weeks now, and each day she felt a little more at ease with herself. Tom's visits had become something she looked forward to, a small but significant part of her day. They had started talking more freely, not just about her struggles, but about everything. Tom would tell her small stories about his past, about his time as a firefighter, and about the people he had helped over the years. It was clear that his life had been full of ups and downs, much like hers. But even with all the comfort that Tom's presence brought, Sarah felt a growing sense of unease in the pit of her stomach. There were moments when she felt faint, dizzy, like the world was spinning around her. She pushed the feelings aside, telling herself it was just exhaustion, that maybe she was simply too tired from everything she had been through. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. It was a Friday afternoon when things took a turn. Sarah had woken up that morning feeling unusually weak. Her limbs felt heavy, and her head was foggy. She tried to brush it off as just another bad day, but when she stood up to get out of bed, a wave of dizziness hit her hard. She staggered and nearly collapsed. It took everything in her to steady herself and sit down again. Her heart raced in her chest, and she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. She didn't want to worry Tom. She didn't want to appear weak or vulnerable, especially after all the kindness he had shown her. But as the day went on, it became impossible to ignore the signs. The dizziness didn't go away. In fact, it worsened. She felt nauseous, her breath shallow and quick. By the time the afternoon rolled around, Sarah was having trouble staying upright. She finally realized that she couldn't keep pretending. As she sat on the bench, her vision blurry, Tom appeared, as he always did, with a friendly wave. He immediately noticed that something was off.
"Sarah, you don't look well," he said, his voice full of concern as he sat beside her.
She tried to smile, but the effort felt hollow. "I'm fine. Just a little tired, I guess." He placed a hand on her shoulder, his brow furrowed. "You're not fine, Sarah. You look like you're about to pass out. I think you need to go to the hospital." Sarah shook her head, trying to dismiss his concern. "No, really, it's just a bad day."
"I'll be okay," but Tom wasn't having it.
He stood up abruptly, offering her his hand. "We're not taking any chances. Come on, I'm taking you to the hospital." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then realized that she didn't have the strength to argue. She let Tom help her to her feet, her legs feeling like jelly. They walked slowly, Tom supporting her all the way. His hand was warm on her back, guiding her forward. The walk was short, but it felt like an eternity. By the time they reached the emergency room, Sarah's breath was shallow and her head was spinning. Tom went straight to the receptionist, explaining the situation, and within moments Sarah was sitting on a hospital bed. It didn't take long for the doctors to begin their tests. They hooked Sarah up to an IV, taking blood samples and running various scans. Tom stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand and talking to her gently. He didn't seem worried, not in the way that someone who didn't know her might be. He was calm, focused, as if this was just another part of the process. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor finally came in. He was a tall man, his face serious but kind. He pulled up a chair and sat beside Sarah's bed, looking at her with a mix of professionalism and empathy.
"Sarah," he began, "I'm afraid you're not just tired.
You've been fighting an infection for a while now, and it's progressed further than we originally thought. Your body is struggling to keep up, and that's why you're feeling the way you do." The words hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. She blinked, not fully understanding what he meant. "What kind of infection?" she asked, her voice shaky. The doctor sighed, pausing for a moment. "It's a severe case, Sarah. You've been dealing with it for some time without realizing the full extent of it. It's affecting your organs, and we need to treat it as soon as possible." Tom squeezed her hand, his expression serious. "What does that mean for her, doctor? Is she going to be okay?" The doctor looked at Tom, his face thoughtful. "With the right treatment, Sarah will have a chance to recover. But we need to start the process now. Time is of the essence." She had known something was wrong, but hearing it from a doctor made it all too real. For the first time in what felt like forever, she was faced with the possibility of losing everything. She had been surviving, but now it seemed like she might have to fight in a way she never imagined. Tom, sensing her panic, leaned closer. "Hey, you're not in this alone, okay?" "I'm right here with you," We'll get through this together." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. She wanted to believe him, to trust that everything would be okay. But the fear in her chest made it hard to breathe. The idea that she might not have much time left terrified her, and for the first time in years, she felt small and vulnerable. The doctor left after a while, promising that Sarah would be given the proper care. Tom stayed with her, talking to her quietly, telling her stories to keep her mind off the overwhelming thoughts. He wasn't just offering her hope, he was giving her the strength to keep going, even when everything seemed uncertain. As the hours passed, Sarah slowly drifted off to sleep, her body exhausted from the shock of it all. Tom remained by her side, never once leaving her alone. He watched over her as she slept, his heart heavy with concern. He had grown fond of her in a way he hadn't expected. In such a short time, she had become someone he cared about deeply. When Sarah woke up, it was to the soft sound of the machines around her and the warmth of Tom's hand in hers. She felt different, weak, but not completely defeated. The doctor had returned, and they explained the treatment plan to her, a series of medications and therapies that would help her body recover. It would be a long road ahead, but Sarah was ready to face it, knowing that she wouldn't be doing it alone. Tom smiled at her, a look of relief on his face. "You're going to get through this, Sarah." "One step at a time," she nodded, feeling a small spark of hope flicker inside her. There was still so much to face, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel entirely alone. Tom was there, and for now, that was enough. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah's condition slowly began to improve. The treatment she had started was harsh, and there were times when she felt as if her body was fighting against her. But each day she found herself growing a little stronger. The constant dizziness faded, and her breath became easier to take. Still, the road to recovery was long, and Sarah knew she wasn't out of the woods yet. Tom was with her every step of the way. He showed up every day, never once complaining about the long hours he spent at her side. At first, it was just about making sure she got her medication, making sure she ate. But soon, their conversations deepened. They talked about their lives, their hopes, and their dreams. There was something incredibly comforting about having someone listen without judgment, someone who was genuinely interested in how she was feeling, even if it was just about small things. The hospital became a place of both dread and relief for Sarah. It was where her illness had been diagnosed, where she had been told that time was running out if she didn't take action. But it was also where she had learned that she wasn't alone anymore, that someone cared enough to sit beside her, to help her, even when she felt at her lowest. As the weeks passed, Sarah started to feel like herself again. She wasn't completely healed, but she had more energy. She could stand up for longer periods of time without feeling dizzy, and she even started walking around the hospital hallways. There were still moments of weakness, but they became fewer and farther apart. Each day was a new step forward. One afternoon, Tom arrived at the hospital with a smile on his face. He had always been calm and composed, but today there was a certain excitement in his expression that caught Sarah's attention. "I've got something for you," he said, holding out a small bag from a bakery. Sarah raised an eyebrow, unsure of what was happening. Tom set the bag down on the bedside table and pulled out a small wrapped pastry. "I thought you might enjoy this," he said, his voice filled with warmth. Sarah smiled softly. It was such a simple gesture, yet it felt incredibly meaningful. "You didn't have to," she said, her voice still a little weak from the lingering effects of the treatment. "I wanted to," he replied, sitting down beside her.
You've been working hard to get better, Sarah. You deserve a little treat. She took the pastry from him, feeling the sweetness of the gesture sink in. Tom had been a constant in her life, showing up when she least expected it, offering comfort when she needed it the most. His actions were always kind, always thoughtful. It was clear that he cared, and Sarah felt a warmth in her chest every time he was near. "Thank you," she whispered, taking a bite of the pastry. It was delicious, the perfect thing to make her feel a little more normal again. As she chewed, she realized that it wasn't just the food that was comforting. It was the thought behind it. Tom had been there for her, even when she didn't know how to ask for help. Tom watched her for a moment, his eyes soft. "You know, you've come a long way, Sarah. I'm really proud of you."
Sarah felt a lump in her throat at his words. She hadn't expected to hear something like that. For so long she had felt like she was invisible, like she was a burden to everyone around her.
But Tom had never made her feel that way. He had always been supportive, always seen the best in her. She had started to believe in herself again, not because of anything she had done, but because of the way Tom had helped her see her own worth. "Thank you," she said again, this time with more emotion in her voice.
"I couldn't have done it without you,"
Tom smiled, but there was a hint of something deeper in his eyes, something that told Sarah there was more to their relationship than just helping each other through tough times.
She had felt it for a while now, the growing connection between them.
It wasn't just about recovery anymore, it was about something more real, more lasting. As the days continued to pass, Sarah became more independent. She was able to leave the hospital and return to her small apartment. Tom still visited her regularly, checking on her and making sure she was staying on track with her recovery. They would sit together, sometimes talking about their pasts, sometimes just enjoying the silence. Sarah had learned a lot about Tom over the weeks. He had been a firefighter, he had lost people he cared about, and he had his own struggles with loneliness. But despite everything, he remained hopeful, always looking for the good in people. It was one of those quiet evenings when Sarah realized something important. She had been holding on to the past for so long, clinging to her memories and regrets. But now, with Tom by her side, she was starting to see the future differently. It wasn't about fixing everything all at once. It was about taking things one step at a time, being present, and allowing herself to heal. That evening, as they sat on her couch, Sarah turned to Tom. "You've been more than just a friend to me," she said, her voice hesitant but sincere.
"You've helped me find a way to keep going. You've made me believe in things again."
Tom looked at her, his expression soft but serious.
"I'm glad I could be here for you, Sarah.
But I think you're stronger than you realize. You've come so far, and I've watched you fight through things that would have stopped most people. That's something special."
Her heart skipped a beat at his words. There was something in his eyes that made her feel like she was seeing him for the first time.
Maybe it was the way he looked at her, the way he truly saw her for who she was, not just as someone he was helping, but as someone worthy of care and love. "I don't know what the future holds," Sarah said softly, "but I'm not afraid of it anymore. Not with you by my side." Tom reached out and gently took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "We'll face it together," he said, his voice steady. "No matter what happens, we've got each other."
Sarah's heart swelled at his words, and for the first time in a long while she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't alone anymore.
Death to the turncoat! She had someone who cared, someone who would stay with her through the uncertain days ahead, and that, in itself, was enough to give her hope for whatever came next.
The next few weeks were filled with small moments of joy. Sarah continued to heal, gaining strength every day. She was learning to take life one step at a time, not rushing through it, not focusing solely on the past or the future. And through it all, Tom remained by her side, a constant source of support and encouragement. One evening as they sat together watching the sunset from her apartment window, Sarah turned to him with a smile. "Thank you," she said quietly.
"For everything. You've made me realize that there's more to life than just surviving."
"I want to live again," Tom smiled back, his eyes filled with warmth.
"You already are, Sarah. You're living every day, one moment at a time. And in that moment, as the sky turned to a deep shade of purple and the stars began to appear, Sarah realized that her journey wasn't just about recovery. It was about rediscovering what it meant to truly live. And with Tom by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next, no matter how uncertain or difficult it might be. The days moved slowly, but with each passing one, Sarah felt a little more like herself. She was getting stronger, both physically and emotionally. The shadow of her illness that had once loomed over her life was beginning to fade, replaced by a new sense of hope that she hadn't known in years. Tom's constant presence in her life had been a source of stability for her, someone who had been there when she was at her lowest, and who had shown her, through his actions and words, what it meant to care. But as the weeks passed, Sarah found herself wrestling with a new, unfamiliar feeling.
It wasn't the fear of the past or the uncertainty of the future. It was something else, a sense of gratitude mixed with something deeper, something that made her heart race whenever she thought about it. She had been so focused on her own survival, on getting through each day, that she hadn't fully realized what Tom's kindness had stirred within her. One quiet evening, Sarah sat by the window, looking out at the city below. The soft glow of street lights illuminated the streets, casting a peaceful calm over everything. She felt a little out of place here, in her small apartment, still coming to terms with how much her life had changed. But she knew she was different now, stronger, more willing to embrace the unknown. Tom had been visiting less frequently recently, his work and his own life pulling him in different directions. She understood, of course. He had been her rock during her recovery, but now she was starting to find her own footing. Still, the quiet left a small ache in her chest, a reminder of the bond they had shared. One afternoon, as Sarah sat reading a book on her couch, she heard a knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone, but when she opened it, her heart skipped a beat. Tom stood there, a warm smile on his face and something small wrapped in his hands.
"Got something for you," he said, holding out a bouquet of flowers. The bright colors, sunflowers, daisies, and lilies, were a stark contrast to the dull apartment.
They were beautiful, and Sarah couldn't help but smile as she took them from him. "They're for you," Tom said, his voice soft. "Just a little something to brighten your day." "Thank you," she said, her voice catching slightly. She hadn't expected this, but the gesture warmed her heart. She hadn't realized how much she had missed him until that very moment. "Mind if I come in?" Tom asked, stepping forward without waiting for her response. He had always been comfortable around her, and Sarah was grateful for that. His presence felt like a reassurance, a reminder that she wasn't alone. "Of course," she said, stepping aside to let him in. Tom sat on the couch next to her, his eyes scanning the room as if he was taking in the changes. It had been a few weeks since he had last been there, and Sarah had been focused on getting better. But now that she had a bit more energy, she'd started cleaning up the place, making it feel more like home. It was still small, but it felt like a space where she could breathe again. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened," Sarah said after a moment, placing the flowers on the table in front of her. "And about how much I owe you. For everything." Tom shook his head, his expression sincere. "You don't owe me anything, Sarah! I was just doing what anyone would do." Sarah looked at him, her heart heavy with the words she had been wanting to say for a long time.
"No, Tom. You were more than just anyone to me. You were there when I couldn't even see past the next minute. You were there when I thought I was invisible. You've done more than just help me heal physically. You helped me heal emotionally, too. And I can't thank you enough for that." Tom smiled, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes, something that made Sarah's pulse quicken. He reached over and gently took her hand in his. "I didn't do it for thanks," he said quietly. "I did it because I care about you, and I always will." For a moment, the words hung in the air between them, charged with something unspoken. Sarah's heart was pounding now, and she could feel the warmth of Tom's hand in hers. She had always known that there was something more to their connection, something deeper than just a friendship born out of mutual respect. She had felt it from the very beginning, but she had been too afraid to acknowledge it, too afraid to open herself up again. But now, sitting there with him, the truth was undeniable. She cared for him, more than she had ever cared for anyone. And it wasn't just gratitude or affection. It was something real, something that had taken root inside her and had grown into something she could no longer ignore. She looked up at him, meeting his gaze. "Tom," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I think I'm falling for you." The words were out before she could stop them, and once they were spoken, Sarah felt a rush of emotion flood over her. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating. For so long, she had closed herself off from the possibility of love, afraid of getting hurt, afraid of trusting someone else. But now, in this moment, with Tom sitting beside her, holding her hand, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could open herself up again.
Tom's expression softened, and for a moment, Sarah feared that he might not feel the same way. But then, he leaned in, gently cupping her cheek with his other hand.
"Sarah,"
he said softly, his voice filled with warmth.
"I felt the same way for a long time. I just wasn't sure if you felt it too."
Relief washed over Sarah in an overwhelming wave. She couldn't help but smile, her eyes brightening as she looked at him.
"I didn't know how to say it,"
she admitted, her voice a little shaky.
"But I do. I care about you. More than I ever thought I could care about anyone."
Tom smiled, his eyes shining with affection.
"We've been through a lot, haven't we?"
he said softly.
"But I'm glad we've come this far. And I'm even more glad that I'm here with you now." This was it, the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she had been too afraid to fully embrace. But now, with Tom beside her, she felt a sense of certainty that she hadn't felt in years.
They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying each other's company. The weight of everything that had happened still hung in the air, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt like the beginning of something new, something beautiful, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt hopeful. As the evening drew to a close, Sarah and Tom sat by the window, watching the stars begin to appear in the sky. It was a quiet moment, but it was filled with so much meaning. Sarah knew that there would be challenges ahead, that their journey wasn't over. But with Tom by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next.
"I'm not afraid anymore,"
Sarah whispered, more to herself than to Tom.
"I'm not afraid of living, of loving.
I'm ready to take the next step." Tom squeezed her hand gently, his voice filled with tenderness.
"And I'll be here with you, every step of the way." As the stars twinkled above them, Sarah realized that she had found something she never thought possible. A love that was both healing and hopeful. A love that had started with simple kindness and had grown into something much deeper.
And in that moment, she knew that no matter what the future held, she wasn't alone. With Tom by her side, she could face anything.